Before we continue the video, let's all just sit down, get some hot chocolate, and put on Kacey Musgraves' Golden Hour and think about positive thoughts, and then come back to the video. Have you done that? Good, okay, let's talk about this dumpster fire. So it isn't really controversial to say that the star-crossed era of Kacey Musgraves was really rough to get through. From all the mixed reviews, the accusations of plagiarism, twice, the Grammys banning her for certain country music categories, and her throwing a temper tantrum over it. Yeah, this wasn't a good year for her, was it? And it's just so surprising for her to take a dip on the level as this one because she's Kacey Musgraves, the most universally adored female country star in the world, behind 3 of the most beloved albums of the 2010s, the empowering activist and media influencer. This Kacey Musgraves made one of the most tepid and uninspired worthless pieces of garbage I've ever seen. Yeah, I'm shocked too. I kinda like this album on initial release to a degree, but frankly, the more I'm exposed to this album, the less and less I like it. And the whole attitude and backlash surrounding the release really sealed the deal in my disdain for the record. And the more it became interesting to look as to why it's such a colossal failure. Starcrossed really is one of the most lifeless projects to come out of this new decade, which is saying something given how awful a lot of the releases have been as of lately. And while it isn't as awful as my 2021 trilogy of 2 out of 10 projects, at least with them, they came from artists I genuinely never cared for. And while they are critically worse than Starcrossed, I actually hate this album far more than these. Kacey's previous work means so much to me and speaks volumes for what they said on family and breaking traditions, just life in general. And to have such an aimless failure hurts far more. It genuinely felt like Kacey stopped trying on this record because she has all these awards and accolades and a reputation that precedes her. I'll take that Grammy, thank you. Oops! So today, I thought I'd take a look as to why this album is a musical travesty. Although, to be fair, I'll go over the good things this album has. I still really like the opener, albeit a little less. It sets the tone perfectly for a journey of tragedy and reels us in as a listener for the journey that's about to begin. It's as if a massive curtain is being risen while I'm listening to it as this grand story is about to unfold. I think the final third sorta derails and loses a lot of the grip the first 2 thirds had in its sheer whimsicalness and magic, but solid song regardless. Camera roll is one of the most unique concepts for emotional turmoil I've ever seen in a song, that despite its execution overall really stands out compared to all the breakup songs that have come and gone. It shows a bit of Kacey's former willingness to go against the formula and subvert our expectations. Hookup scene is still really good. The only song where my opinion hasn't changed for the worse and brings back the trait I loved of Kacey almost saying directly to us and homing advice and wisdom that'll stay with us. Starcrossed progresses a narrative. Not a lot of albums do that, especially for country music. Keep Looking Up is not annoying. That's an accomplishment given how insufferable a lot of the album is. Stop. This is a good vibes portion. Think positives. I still like the opening to Gracias a la Vida. Come on, work with me album. I'm trying my best. Ooh. There's no pop star collaborations. Huh? Okay, that's all I got. Let's get into this. Now, the main inspiration for the album itself was that Kacey Musgraves divorced her husband Rustin Kelly, and obviously my best wishes for both of them. The album is supposedly a concept record depicting the divorce experience in a Shakespearean tragedy type lens, and let me tell you, that's just clickbait. Starcrossed is such an extremely bizarre album in terms of its conceptual narrative. Like, yeah, there are certain elements that can be picked up that resemble somewhat of a story, but for the most part, this album just drops utterly random tracks for the sake of utter randomness. Yes, Starcrossed is a pretty powerful opener and tone setter for a potentially interesting story, but from there on out, the plot begins to utterly collapse in on itself, and thinking about how it can somewhat fit together hurts my brain. It's like we're about to get into some really heavy stuff after the opening track, but then the album hits the rewind switch, taking us into this gender normative landscape, which on paper is an admirable move, but we get into the first trap card as the album doesn't really know where to go from this. We're at the beginning of this relationship, and what happens now? How did you guys fall apart? The album just mulls over these things with these tepid, childish songs like Simple Times and If This Was a Movie, none of which touch upon the actual tragedy that takes place between her and Rustin. It seems stupid of me to ask these things, but this is, as previously mentioned, a concept record. Essentially, it's the soundtrack to a musical. These are pivotal moments in the story I need to see. If I'm supposed to feel for Kacey, I have to understand where she's coming from. But in a song like Justified, it's all just, I'm sad and I have the right to be sad. Okay, but how? This is what's at the center of why Starcrossed fails conceptually on so many levels. Kacey makes it all about herself, and Justified is really emblematic of that fact. All the songs up to this point are barely about the trauma she endured during this divorce, and more so about the safe, boring experiences nobody cares for, like going to the mall and shopping with friends. There's some hints to emotional trauma in Cherry Blossoms, but it, pun intended, blows over these possible developments to the point where it's just comical. And it's not like it gets certainly better from here. Angel tries to cast self-pity on herself without actually showing us what there is to blame in the first place. And at this point, this album pretty much drops all prospects of the divorce entirely and only reappears in brief moments. There Is a Light, the second to last track, is just hysterical, as it's supposed to be this grand finale of Kacey coming to terms with herself, acknowledging the darkness but saying there is a light inside of her. And I'm just sitting here like, what darkness? I've seen albums dedicated to embracing romanticism more dark than this. And Gracias a la Vida, actually, I want to save that one for later. Comparing this to actual divorce records that came out this year, 29 just makes Starcrossed look like a joke in comparison. 29 takes the time in establishing plot points, and this isn't even a concept record. Diamondback is a petty bop that establishes a petty side to Carly that's very entertaining. We get to see her villainize her former partner in a way that's super compelling with Next Girl and Never Wanted to Be That Girl and You're Drinking My Problem. Portions of it dealing with things that people can genuinely reflect to, like just trying to make it through the day despite emotional turmoil in day one. Then there's the self-titled track, which is this grand tornado of emotions, where we can actually see regrets, we can see heartbreak. This album works because it captures a heartfelt look at divorce, and despite it not being story-driven, manages to highlight several meaningful portions that the listener can grasp upon in a profound way. Starcrossed acts like this meticulously crafted divorce tragedy, but can't even get a proper narrative out the door. There's a lot presented in 29 written in stone I can actively invest in. I don't feel for Kacey because there's barely anything to feel for, but that's just the narrative. Musically, it has to be good, right? Right? I think a lot of what makes Starcrossed inferior nature stick out like a sore thumb is its predecessor. Golden Hour was one of the most acclaimed albums of its year, and did it deserve to be? A little bit, yeah. It was a breath of fresh air compared to all the cheap pop country we were beginning to see on the daily, while also a complete 180 on Kacey's previous work. Its blending of country and pop are something I still hold in high regard to this day. Keyword blending. I can consider Golden Hour to a degree a country album. A lot of the tracks keep up with a country-esque tone, and a lot of the lyricism was of the same caliber as Kacey's previous two projects. Starcrossed, on the other hand, is a fever dream of so many genres and styles trying so hard to intersect and all of it falling over itself. I'm just gonna cast any pretense of country music out of the way because it's not. I don't need to dedicate so much time to something that's blatantly obvious. The only country instrumental element is the subtle banjo on Easier Said. The actually interesting and more blatant thing is how Starcrossed doesn't understand how to take any of the musical ideas it has and connect them properly. And it's not like I'm against a diverse sonic and genre palette, some of my favorite records have those. It's the fact that all of it just sounds superficial. None of the musical ideas presented stand out in a way that holds an iota to Golden Hour's greatness. The awkward synth interjections occur a lot on the album, and it hurts a lot of the album more than you think. As previously mentioned with the opening, which is a blatant sign of the producers not really knowing what they were doing, you have an incredible tone setter and it brings down its greatness with these completely unnecessary pop elements that jive with the rest of the track. We go from this mystical tragic opener to a tepid, overwhelming mess that falls apart the more it goes along. Good Wife has the single worst implementation of Daft Punk's musical style I've ever seen. It genuinely feels like an insult to one of the most influential and iconic duos in all of music history. The chorus makes me want to rip out my hair because God, it's annoying and insufferable. I'm saving the more cultural music aspects for later, and by God, is there a lot to say about them. The album insists on keeping Kacey in this god-awful filter, which makes one of the most soothing vocalists country has ever seen lack any of the emotional depth her delivery portrayed on her 3 previous albums. At best, the delivery comes off boring and it's easy to gloss over. At worst, you get songs like Breadwinner, which is one of the most annoying songs I've ever heard in my life. The sudden leaps and the filter make for something so annoying and insufferable. Thankfully, Hookup Scene doesn't have the filter, and it probably would have ruined the song for me as it sorta did with Camera Roll. The album's takes on genres are incomprehensible. We just leap through folk, synth pop, to K-pop influence, Latin fusion, to jazz, flute, and it's too much. The album just can't grasp onto a single musical idea long enough to have any ounce of musical consistency and insists on jumping through these hoops despite it not capable of nailing any of them. I don't mind diverse palettes as long as they can consist with what the songs themselves are saying, and they just don't. The lifeless sonic palette and the vague stories don't correlate whatsoever. Red is an album with rock, country, and pop all at work, yet is capable of matching the tones and messages of all the songs they belong to almost seamlessly. That's not what this album does. It tries to be so ambitious, borrowing the styles of others, and fails to capture an ounce of their greatness while completely mishandling how those styles work, while insisting on utilizing some of the worst trends modern pop has, and can't create a proper tone to save its life. Yes, there are some moments where it can accomplish that to a degree, but they don't make up for the sheer incoherent mess the rest of the album is. But Kacey's a lyrical marvel. I'm sure she can't disappoint there. Oh, you poor soul. This, to me, while not the stupidest or even the critically worst aspect, is the one that disappoints me the most. This has got to be one of the single biggest nosedives I've ever seen for a country artist in terms of their lyricism. Kacey, for me, has a way of talking down to us, as if she's singing directly to us, the listener. A lot of her best songs, Follow Your Arrow, Space Cowboy, and Rainbow, have a way of as if they're relaying wisdom in a gentle yet incredibly thoughtful manner. Do you think that trait carried over to this album? Who the fuck do you think you're kidding? Of course not! This album's lyricism is just so frustrating, and it's shocking it came from the same person. Good Wife storytelling honestly feels robotic, as if I'm just hearing the instructions for pampering some dude. Waking him up, nice and slow, bring him coffee in bed, listen to his problems, tell him I understand, touch him so he knows in his heart he's the only one, try to loosen up and be more fun. Yeah, I could be more fun. Does that honestly sound like it came from a person to you? Or in Cherry Blossoms, when we're on fire, it's something to see. No one can question the chemistry. Even in nature, timing is everything. Where is the subtlety? Where is the emotion? There's just nothing there. And in the same song, we get the stupid line of, I hope you haven't forgotten, Tokyo wasn't built in a day. Get it? Because Rome wasn't built in a day, but it's Tokyo. Get it? It's so witty and funny. No. It's stupid and should never have come to fruition whatsoever, as it doesn't even have context into what the song is directly about, apart from the fact that cherry blossoms grow in Japan, and Tokyo is a city in Japan. There's nothing clever about that line, and frankly feels annoying. The robotic lyricism continues with the following tracks to a point where it's just comical to point out. These songs don't feel like they come from an emotionally complex person. It feels AI generated, and it shows. But none of this compares to the sheer annoyance and insufferability that is Breadwinner. He wants a breadwinner. He wants your dinner until he ain't hungry anymore. He wants your shimmer to make him feel bigger until he starts feeling insecure. This was the same person that wrote Merry Go Round. The entire emotional spectrum it tries to display lacks any of the nuance and volume of Kacey at her best. Hookup Scene is a genuine triumph on this album for the fact it came out as good as it did. It's the only moment that actually taps into the Kacey Musgraves I used to know. This sorta goes back into the musical aspect of the video in one key area: the cultures Kacey tries to capture on this album, and how none of them work. The first moment this becomes prevalent is with Cherry Blossom and its usage of Japanese musical styles. I've heard some gorgeous songs that come from Japanese folk, and the only thing this song offers is like, are you kidding me? You have a song centered around one of the most pivotal planets in Japanese philosophy, and this is how you tie in the culture? Not only that, it just mishandles the symbolism of cherry blossoms in general. I know this isn't the most glamorous part of tearing this album down, but it needs to be said. The interpretation of other nations' culture is just so badly mishandled, it infuriates me. The same level of cultural accuracy occurs on Simple Times with these cheap phrases that mock Japanese music. But to me, the biggest misstep is a culmination in what is far and away the worst song on Starcrossed: Gracias a la Vida. This song is such an utter train wreck on so many levels. First off, the message the original song represents. This song represents the farewell by original songwriter Violeta Parra before she committed suicide. It's a song about being grateful for life and expressing the joys that can come from it. Yet there's a somberness, as it isn't just about praising life itself, it's also about goodbye. Now tell me, dear viewer, how in the hell does this song fit in the context of the story Starcrossed represents? Short answer is, it doesn't. Now, it's one thing to add a cover for the sake of cover's sake. Morgan Wallen did that for Dangerous, which isn't a narratively driven album, which is fine. Starcrossed isn't a standard album. It's a concept record. Each song is supposed to progress the story. Is this saying Kacey or the protagonist is done with life or grateful for it? Because nowhere in the album is gratefulness properly expressed. In no way does this song fit into the context of what this story somewhat set up. Not to mention the musical style itself is portrayed so terrible, it's genuinely insulting. With it starting off on an old record player and to constantly evolve into this ear-rape travesty is such a massive clusterfuck. Gracias a la Vida is a song so attached and beloved among Latin culture. And to have this abomination occur just hurts so much as someone of Peruvian descent. The act of distorting such a gorgeous song to this degree is just horrible. And to me, this act of mishandling other cultures, that of which Kacey had no idea what she was doing, really seals the deal in why Starcrossed failed as much as it did. More and more is this album being regarded as nothing but a complete and utter failure, even for some of the diehard Kacey fans. It kind of annoys me how we give so much flack to artists like Walker Hayes or Nico Moon because of the sound they possess, but albums like this get off scot-free despite them just being dull and uninspired, just because they came from someone a lot of people liked. More than any other release the past year, do I think it represents the great divide between country fans and non-country fans' perception of country music in general. In a lot of people's eyes, this is a country album, and view people who criticize the album as gatekeepers, and on the other hand, they view it as a cheap pop album. It feels like more than ever, pop is trying to interject itself into country music and make it the new Hollywood with this album. After receiving widely positive reviews from all genre-based critics and being utterly rejected by the country community, the Grammys put their foot down with it not being eligible for Best Country Album, which I appreciate. But Kacey's reaction afterwards and her showing off how many pictures she has with these other country artists leads me to this conclusion. Kacey Musgraves is not a country artist. I've been very defensive for artist creativity the past year and against gatekeeping, but this album more than any other truly represents a line in the sand. There is no attempt to being country at all on this release, musically or even in the branding, with her reaching out to labels to promote her music the same way with Olivia Rodrigo and Billie Eilish. She's gone so far out of the country boundaries, both music and culturally, it's kind of laughable to keep considering her it up to this point. She's no longer interested in getting stories across to country audiences, just getting to be on Hollywood stages and get brand deals and make songs for taco commercials. All of it doesn't scream country music to me, and that she's this desperate to remain in country irks me. When her platform could have gone to artists I actually do think represent country greatly, with Carly Pearce or Morgan Wade, who do have themselves grounded in the country genre greatly and offer female representation, which is a thing Kacey was advocating for when this decision arrived. I'll just end the video like this. Kacey Musgraves is more than just not country. She's inauthentic. Kacey can say they can take her out of the country, but can't take the country out of her. But in my eyes, they did.